Hello, everyone. Today I have a great pleasure of talking with Linda Mastrangelo. She is, of course, a dreamer, an author, teacher, and psychotherapist, working with people with grief and dreams and many other stuff because Linda wears many hats. And also, she is the executive director of Institute for Dream Studies, the place that I learned all about the dream work. And I would like to just really welcome Linda here today and maybe start with hearing a little bit of your story. How did your journey took you to becoming psychotherapist that is also working with dreams and with grief?
Oh, it is so lovely to be here, Joanna, with you, especially our connection with IDS, Institute for Dream Studies. And I love what you're doing with this project. It's so important. And I feel really blessed to be here and sharing on this because we're dreamers, as you say, and this is our work. So anytime we get to play and chat about dreams
Right?
is always exciting, so I appreciate the opportunity. Gosh, I would say my dream life started very young. I would say it was very intense. I had a lot of intense experiences at a very young age with not a lot of context or support, and I think that's what drew me to finding my dreaming community later. I felt that that was very important because I felt so much of the first half of my life or the first couple of decades, I was really doing this on my own. Didn't have a lot of support or help with exploring what these experiences meant, but I knew they were important. And I'm really grateful that I kept a dream journal and I wrote my experiences down. And I worked in that way, and I sought out ways in which to engage with my dreams through reading or just, working with my dreams. But it wasn't until later where I was in graduate school for poetry and writing. I found a wonderful poet and mentor. She was a professor. And it was interesting. She was looking at my poetry and she's like, "You have a lot of archetypal imagery
Mm,
in here." And so she recommended I see a Jungian therapist, and I was in my 20s, and I just lucked out that somebody was willing to work with me. And that really launched this first appreciation and dynamic engagement with somebody who was actually going to listen to my dreams, but also provide a container, provide a place where I could really explore in these realms, in these depths that felt safe. And because a lot of the experiences didn't feel like I could, because I they were very what we would call otherworldly. A lot of dream traveling, a lot of dream experiences that were very nightmarish and initiation type dreams. So to have somebody hold a space for that was life-changing. And then the next big step or the big epic shift for me was actually meeting just and that was another very synchronistic meeting. I we always laugh because I actually had dreams of her. I think it was about 10 years before I met her. And that
mm.
was
Wow.
the most, yeah, extraordinary, validating conversation. It was just, wow, I was supposed to be here. And it was that trajectory was leading me to meeting her. And I had no idea that a dreaming community existed like IDS
Mm.
or ISD. And she was just forming the school when I went to her workshop. So I was one of her first students at IDS. So it's really neat to see that come full circle with the work that I'm doing now with her as the director, but back then it was like it blew my mind that somebody was actually doing this work, bringing dreams into the world, having a school and supporting other dreamers like myself in ways not just to work on ourselves personally, which is huge, but to also bring that out into the world. So to answer your question, I mean, it was is it a fascinating trajectory. I was inspired by this Jungian therapist who was doing this work, and I even had a dream with her that I was diving into the ocean, and she wore an amethyst ring, and I didn't know it at the time. So in the dream, I was diving and I picked up this amethyst ring, but it was too big for me. And I told her the dream, and she's like, "Oh, I wear an amethyst ring." And later, I was like, "Oh, I was not. I was. It was. I was still young. I wasn't gonna fit into that ring yet." But I tried it on and it was a little too big, but to me, it was like letting me know that I was gonna be doing this work myself and that eventually I would grow into that ring. And it was just an amazing thought that an understanding about, wow, how dreams work too, in letting you know and as a guiding force, as a map for possibility, right? What things to come. So that and then Justina, with IDS, we did a 2-year at the time. It was a 2-year in-person program and whew, just transformative.
And
Just
that was a parallel
absolutely,
to you becoming a therapist?
absolutely. Because I learned certainly my dreams were pointing in this direction and I was able to realize that this is my life's work through this experience. It just was like I was so lost. I didn't know my path, my purpose. I felt there was no container, and I didn't even know this existed, Joanna. I had no idea that you could do this. And so once I got to really diving in to this work, I was also introduced to these incredible people like Jeremy Taylor, Kelly
Mm.
Bulkley, Fariba Bogzaran, and Marilyn Fowler, who later I met through Justina at the ISD conference. So one of the requirements was for us to go to this conference, and it's another mind blowing experience. I was like, oh my God, these are my people. I'm talking about the International Association for the Study of Dreams, which is a wonderful organization, and I've been a part of them since 2006 or 7, I think. Yeah. So again, it was about community, right? Seeing that there were other people like me and from all over the world. And they were so lovely. And that's how I met Marilyn Fowler and Freba Bogzaran, they had started a dream studies certification program, graduate program at JFK University. And
One
so
of
I
the
met
very few
them.
places where you can
Yeah,
actually learn Dreamwork, which is still very surprising for me. But I think we are on the way to change that.
that's right. We're pioneers. It's still, I feel like now, and we can shift gears if you'd like, but I do feel like there has been a shift in our consciousness around dreaming and working with our dreams, especially since, the pandemic. I think that has shifted a lot of people's consciousness around dreams. But it
That's right.
certainly has been my own trajectory starting at a very young age all the way up until now, and to be able to not only work with people as a therapist, but I have students as well and just colleagues. It's just been incredible. And I get to meet people like you.
You can
Who
say that it's been a dreamy.
it's been a waking dream. Absolutely. So that's the short of it. I
The short, yeah.
the short of it, but just to give you an idea of how the dream led me in this direction has been just I'm always in awe of it. I never take that for granted.
And how did grief fell into all of that? Because you specialize in grief, in helping people during grieving periods.
Well, the dream, it was another part of my discovery. And if you had told me years ago that I'd be working with grief and loss and death and dying, I would I would have been very, very shocked about that. However, I do believe that that also started very young. One of my first memories I've ever had was being in a catacombs. It was a powerful, very visceral memory where I was engaging with this environment, the cave where the bones were, and I remember holding skulls and putting my fingers in the side. I can't explain it, but it was very visceral, and I was surprisingly not afraid. I was very comfortable in that environment, not sure where this came from, and I thought maybe that was just one of my I must have been, like, 3 years old,
Mhm.
but the funny part is my father, who's Italian, so we used to go to Italy, and, he doesn't remember that, and so it makes me wonder, was
Mm.
this an actual memory from that time, or was this another memory of an older, more ancient time? I don't know, but it was so clear and visceral. It was something I remembered. It was one of my first memories. So that was interesting to think about how that connects. And I noticed I was getting a lot of dreams pointing in that direction. One of the first indicators was this dream I had with Kuan Yin, with whom I'm not, I wasn't really familiar with her at the time, but I was supposed to adopt a baby, and this was going to be a very difficult baby, and I learned it was Kuan Yin, and I remember being very surprised about this, and she had chosen me to be her mother,
Mm.
and later I saw myself raising her and nurturing her in different stages of her life. And so I remember speaking to one of my mentors about this, Lee Irwin, and he mentioned because Kuan Yin was one of his, I think his god, one of the goddesses that he had engaged with. And I feel like she's one who, I mean, she rides the dragon. She is the one who gives the elixir of life. She's the one that hears the cries of the many and holds the many in her arms who suffer. And so I feel like she embodied that this was going to be work I was going to do in this way, in this realm. And then I would just have dreams where I was actually working with, I call them my psychopompic dreams, where I was working with the dead, people who have transitioned, who might have been stuck. They might have had trauma, and I was there to support them with the healing process for them to heal
Mm.
into, into their next place. And so there was a lot of dreams about that. I have had a lot of dreams where I'm supporting healers with this work, either healing or supporting those who have maybe stuck or are dying. It just the theme kept coming up. It was like I had another job at night. I can't explain it, but I had another this other part of me that was doing this work in these other realms and supporting families who had experienced loss. This was all just Joanna, I can't, so many of these dreams, so many. And visitations, with, with people that had passed or teachers that were, no longer here. It just, it, and it continues. So it's one of the things that I'm excited about in terms of recognizing my connection to the underworld, psychopompic dreaming, and that this is my work. And and look at this little girl who had this memory of
That's
being in the
very
underworld,
interesting how
right?
it connects. Yes, yes, it's
Yeah.
incredible, like how you allow these dreams to really guide you, and you took, like, you trusted it, and you took an action, like you shifted your path that direction. That's really incredible, and I can completely relate to the feeling of like doing work when we sleep or living some other life when we sleep, because for me, I also say
Yeah.
when I go to sleep I just continue in just different realms, and not the same rules apply as they do on earth in our waking state right now, but like when I go to sleep, like nothing ends for me. I'm just continuing in some other dimensions, as I say, dream dimensions or other. So I really understand this feeling
Yeah.
that you had, that you are like connecting to some other realms where you do this work already. Could you share a bit about how dreams, from the years of your experience as a dream worker and therapist, how dreams can support us when we grieve? Because I feel that nowadays, not only we have our personal losses, like family members, people we love, animals, but we also grieving collectively because of the state of the world, of the earth, because of the wars, because of the climate change, because of everything that's going on. And many sensitive souls, really, I am myself I feel I'm in constant grief for the people I didn't know, for the places I didn't visited, but I know they've been destroyed by natural disaster or by human doing. So it's like this, the energy of grief is so present. So I would like to ask you about both, about the personal, how we can help, how we can get help from our dreams when we're grieving on a personal and also on the collective level.
Oh, it's such an important question you're asking, and I love how you're holding it because that's important. I see the same. I see dreams working personal in the personal realm, in the communal realm, as well as the collective realm. And if you're a dreamer, you're holding a big container, right? And certainly when you're working and serving others, you're holding, I always say, I hold a very big container when I'm working with my clients or my students, that it's important that we hold that because dreams are going to touch on all of that. And if you are exceptionally sensitive, Leon calls it the lightning rod people, the people that can channel the collective grief, the collective goings on, so to speak, that can feel very big and overwhelming. So I can absolutely speak to that too. Well, the neat thing about my path was that I got to work at hospice, and that time in my life shifted a lot because I was able to actually do this work directly and focus my all my attention on this on the grief, death, and dying part of my life. So it was initiatory for me to be able to go into that space, and that was where I did a deep dive into this work. And I got incredible training. I was very lucky that I had a supervisor who actually, because this was the other thing, how do we do dream work in spaces where that may not be something people feel comfortable with, especially when you're dealing with institutions? And weirdly, I mean, it sounds odd saying this out loud, but weirdly, there can be a resistance to this work in those spaces. So I was very blessed to have a supervisor who, when I met with her, that was another very like one of those life-changing meetings. I was very upfront with her and I said, this is my work, the dream work. And she just so happened to be someone who was in a dream group with a community of her friends. And so she was very open and very supportive of me bringing that into my practicum when I was training as a therapist. So when I was interning there, I got to hold space for people who were either experiencing anticipatory grief, so they had a loved one who was in the process of transitioning, and then of course the families afterwards trying to hold and navigate the loss. And I worked with all different people from all ages. And so I learned so much from that time, Joanna. It was just so precious. And what I learned was people wanted so much to talk about their dreams and these experiences. And I felt so honored because they had a safe space, permission to share these dreams. And I got to see the nuances of these dreams, because certainly there were dreams that really spoke to their grief, was more specifically around their their own grieving process. So to give you an example, many of the people I worked with had to witness their loved ones declining in their eyes, right? And that is very traumatic to see a loved one go through their own transition, especially if they're not well. And we can see the body change, we can see the cognitive abilities, they're not the same people, and medications can play a role in this. But just to watch your loved one in that state and go through that transition is very traumatic. And a lot of the dreams I worked with my clients were all about that that trauma of bearing witness in that way. And their dreams would reflect the emotional impact that had, and sometimes it would reflect even the physical, or give a kind of a resonant parallel to what they went through. But as you know, with dreams, which is so powerful, is that the dreams are the bridge that connect us to these emotions in a way that we can handle it, right? In a way that we can understand it and work with it. And so I was there to just provide guidance and consciousness and context to their experiences. So it was a way to enter that space with them in a very loving, empowered way. So what comes to mind, one of the clients was experiencing what we call the death rattle, which is a very intense term, but it's a term that, our bodies do, like birth, same with death. Our bodies know how to die. And so part of that process is this labored, almost rattling breath. It
Mhm.
happens when, we're about to transition. And for people who don't know what that is, it can sound very, very painful. And when you're seeing your loved one breathe in this way, it can be very traumatic for them. And so I remember, and then my client gave me permission to share this, that there was a dream they had where their loved one had a bag over their head and was having trouble breathing. So I got to sit with them and explore that and recognize, oh, this is a grief dream. This is a dream that's letting us know how hard that was for them to witness that, because in the dream, they were, like, suffocating, and that's what
Yeah.
they was happening, and then we were able to hold all the emotions around what that was like, and later also come to a realization, like, "Oh, that wasn't a suffocation, that was just part of the natural transitioning that was going on with their loved one." And it was remarkable because they felt empowered in the sense that they were ready. And that's what I always tell my clients when they have these dreams, even though they're nightmarish, they're letting us know we're ready to work on whatever it is that's coming in, and that they had a safe place to work on that. And we did that together, and it was a beautiful entry point because it was like, okay, we need to work on this part of your grief right now, which had to do with this traumatic witnessing around seeing their ones breathing in this way. And so I just started working with my clients in this way and letting them know that their dreams were these maps for us, that they were places we knew where we could go in their grief. And so I would just use my training. We worked with Alan Wolfelt, who he has wonderful books about the 6 mourning, the way that people grieve. A little like Kubler-Ross, but a little different holding. But there was this way I could incorporate these 6 mourning stages with the dreams that were coming through. Like, maybe this dream is about the shock of the loss itself,
Yeah.
not grieving.
I would like to ask about that because I think it's
Yeah,
something I hear a lot this from people that share dreams with me, that
yeah,
they relive the death moment in their dreams many times. Oh,
mhm,
I kept dreaming my grandma just passed away and I keep dreaming about her funeral or her passing away or my mother just departed and I see her departing in my dream and it keeps coming back. They describe it as nightmares because it really brings very strong emotions and feelings. What would be your advice to someone who is reliving the real end time after
yes.
time?
Well, again, I believe that dreams, especially recurring dreams, are really about these are things we need to lean into. Like, that it's not subtle, right? Especially nightmares, right? I love Jeremy Taylor when he talks about all dreams come in the service of health and wholeness. And I do believe that. I believe that when we have dreams like this, especially end of life dreams, that there's a need to lean into it and work with it. And if we're not, we're going to keep
Mhm.
having it. It's going to keep repeating until we lean in and hold and whatever that is for that person. Like, for this person I was telling you about, for them it was the death rattle that
Yeah.
was really disturbing for them. For others, it could be unfinished business. It could be like where I didn't get to share or say what I wanted to say. It could be just, I have had clients who shared that what was really upsetting was the changes that their loved one was going through, that the
Mm.
medications they were taking, they were very different in their personality. So So the dream will point that out. The dream will let us know what is it about that transitioning or that relationship that needs to be tended to. So it's so specific. And that's the incredible power of these dreams because they will let us know where this person is in their grieving process. And then we can work that way. And then, because I'm not going to tell them, I don't know until we see. The dream will certainly point us in that direction. And then we see it as an entry point, like, "Oh, okay, so you have unfinished business. There's some guilt or there's some way in which the end of this life was traumatic for you or unsettling for you. But I don't know what that is, Joanna, until we explore the dream together. And then we're like, aha. Does
Yeah,
that
yes, that's an amazing advice, and I think that for so many people that are really having those dreams, because I know many people have this type of dreams, is can be very very valuable, because as you said, maybe it was something about the disease itself, or the way they departed, or as you said, something was not said, or maybe we couldn't be there when they transitioned. So it can be so many things. So even finding the part or the point or the stage of the grief, as you said, through our dreams. And again, just showing how our dreams always want the best for us. Like they, even though
That's
we
right.
see it as nightmares, right? Because yeah, it's like reliving the pain. It's very hard. But then again, the purpose, as you said, is so we can find a resolution and we can move on through this process. And the dreams are always there to help us.
I see it as a blessing because I think that so much of this work, especially with grief, is that people are are given so many mixed messages about grief. This is why I
Mm,
do the work, Joanna, because for us, at least here in the States, it's very taboo. It's
mm,
unfortunate. And people are very uncomfortable talking about grief and death and dying. And there is this attitude here of, and this goes for my profession. I mean, so we have this, the DSM, which is our diagnostic book of all,
mhm,
and I remember when I first started at hospice, people, we were talking about the diagnostic model for grief, and it said people should, they should be grieving for 2 months. And then after that, it becomes depression or a pathological thing. And I was just it blew my mind because I'm like, my God, here we are. We're supposed to be serving soul. That's what therapists are, really. And we're pathologizing grief, and it felt very not okay. And I'm glad I had a community with
mm.
hospice who shifted that and was very much about, no, there's no timeline. We need to hold grief sacredly, and it's its own thing. And I learned so quickly how important it was to have a container for grief and to not have a timeline and to not pathologize. And you were really working against a society that wants us to get over it. And that if you're not over it, then it's not okay. And so I was really adamant about making sure people did not feel that there was something wrong with them because they weren't like what we think. You need to get better. And it's like, this is not what grief is about. It's living with it and also being able to tend and follow your own organic holding of this without being shamed for it. Because it's interesting how we get these messages from our society. People are expected to just be
Yeah.
okay, or and usually it's the people around us that want us to go back to the way we were before, or they're uncomfortable with their own grief, or
Mhm.
they're uncomfortable with death, so they project that onto the people around them that are grieving. So I think so much of this work is about normalizing, but also inviting in and reframing the way we see death, the way we see grief. It's a way we are needing to hold this completely differently. And that
Yeah.
includes your collective grief question.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with you on this subject. It's like we're so detached, like we're so focused on this living part that we completely deny the fact that we all gonna be gone at some point. and that it's actually an important subject and shouldn't be so taboo, and people should be given the space and the time to grieve in their own ways. Yeah, that's so important. It's such a beautiful work you're doing. Could we touch on this collective grief, like how maybe our dreams can, because for someone that is feeling it like I do, this is very painful. Like I feel like I am constantly grieving. So how we can harness this wisdom, this comfort that comes in our dreams to go through it, to go through this process just on the collective level, I guess.
I think it's a perfect segue because I do believe it takes a different shift or paradigm shift in the way we hold
Mhm.
death, dying, and loss. And I one of the things that I was excited to be a part of was this movement called the Death Cafe. I don't know if you're
Yes, yes, I'm
familiar.
familiar with, yes.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. So basically, it was a movement, and I wish I could remember the details of how it began, but it began years ago. I think it was England, where there was this understanding of how disconnected, like what you were just sharing, that there is such a disconnect and a dissociation and we are so not connected to the fact that we're all going to die. And you can see the effect that has on our, our communities because we're denying this part of us. And then what happens is we can see all the different repercussions, like, and that includes, what's happening to our planet, right? And that includes environmental issues because we're not connecting to our true natures. We're not connecting that we're all connected to the land and to nature. We are nature. And I think if we leaned into this with a much more open, curious way, I think it could shift so much of what's happening right now. Because I do feel because we're not connected, it is causing all this, I would say, because there's such a toxic way in which we are numbing out, right? Whether it's consuming or we're not connecting with each other, we're not doing our personal work, we're not leaning into the shadow stuff in ourselves. I think it's all connected, Joanna. So I do believe that if we can lean into these conversations like what we're doing today is wonderful to talk about death. And the Death Cafe is a place where people can talk. It's providing a space, a safe space to just share about death and without any agenda. It's not a therapy group. It's just people coming together. All you need to do is provide a space, some cake, and then
Yes, and
people
coffee.
talk. Cake is big. We like cake. So I was I was excited to host some of these in my community, and it was a beautiful time too. This is all okay, and then we can talk about collective with the COVID, the pandemic. But we would gather together, and it was just a beautiful way for people to just talk about death and not feel they had to manage or they could just talk about whatever they were feeling around it. And it provided that normalization because people do, they do want to talk about this.
Yeah.
And the more we do, the more we can feel more connected to ourselves and each other. And yeah, I think that's a big part of it, having these kinds of conversations and normalizing what you were saying, these and talking about these dreams, because we can have these collective dreams. And if you're very sensitive like you are, Joanna, I can imagine you're holding a lot of the grief that you're experiencing around you. So I believe a big part of this is having a safe space to engage with each other. Yeah. And
And that's why we need more community for dreamers, more openness for dream sharing, coming back to the basic, like to normalizing dream sharing and talking about dreams and not dismissing their importance and the value. It's like I feel like we did the circle here because it's like that's where everything starts. Once we create more spaces, once we make people more comfortable with sharing their dreams, and even understanding that it's such a beneficial thing to do to just even share the dreams, not even going into dream interpretation or you can go very far, but you can also just stay in this place of like just sharing dreams with each other, or with your families, with your communities, to knowing that there's space for that. As you said, you can connect into this space, into this dream, into this one dream that we all have, and see how actually dreams show us that we are all the same eventually in the end of the day. And it's kind of also for me, as I see it and as I started this project, is like the remedy for the disconnection and the division that we're experiencing in the world. Like everything divides us, our race, our beliefs, in what side of the wall we're standing, whose sides we are taking, and so on and so on. And dreams, I feel there are this beautiful medicine for this disconnection, because once we look into our dreams, we can all realize that we are all the same, we all want the same, and the disconnection, it's just this division is just an illusion that's been created. Yeah, so
you
that's why I see it.
and I want to add to this. One of the neatest discoveries I found, especially doing this work, is how much we're dreaming together
Yeah.
and that we each have a part of that. I read this incredible book, Dreaming Myself, Dreaming a Town. Susan, I think it was Watkins is her name. And she was part of the Seth. I don't know if you know or familiar with the Seth material, but it was a group of people in the 70s who worked with Jane Roberts, who was channeling this man, this entity, Seth. And she was part of the group that was working with that material, and she was part of helping writing some of the books or transcribing. So she was a journalist, and she discovered when she moved into this town in upstate New York near the Finger Lakes, she became a reporter there. And she discovered that when she was looking through their archives, that around the Civil War, there was a whole outbreak of fires that was going on in this town. And she started to think about, wow, what was going on with the townspeople at this time? And even more, she was like, huh, what would it have been like if we could have collected all of their dreams?
Mm.
And what was going on? What was the bigger picture of what was the snapshot of this time? And so she had an aha moment, and she decided that she was going to do that in this small town of Dundee. And sure enough, she started collecting these dreams of her community and started seeing these patterns. What was happening in the dreams were also flowing into the waking life, and then that gets you and thinking, what's the dream continuum here? What is the dream?
Yes.
What isn't? But what was so neat about it was having that lens. She got to see that everybody was connected in a way that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise unless you were looking at the dreams in this way. And one really powerful example of that was there was a death in it was a drowning that happened to one of the community members. And what she found was there were a collection of dreams that were showing different parts of what happened.
Wow.
Yeah, right? And again, it shows that we are all connecting. And the fact that she brought consciousness to that and that she had that ability to pull these pieces together was such a for me, I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, this is so reflective of the experiences that I've had working with dreams with groups and community to see how we are dreaming together and that we're also this is like the dream activism movement, right? This idea of coming together, sharing dreams so that we can also offer up possible shifts and solutions and ways in which we can work in the community together and be more proactive because like you said, it can feel very overwhelming when we have these dreams on our own. But what if we bring that to the community? What if we bring it to the whole where we're able to work together and maybe we have a piece of the puzzle and then if we work with other people, they have a piece and they have a piece. And then together we're like, here's the bigger picture. This is the way we can
Mm.
work together. And it's way more empowering, right? When we can share instead of holding that burden of heaviness. We're like, oh, wait a minute. I'm not supposed to do this all on my own either. We each have a role to play, but we can't all do it. We can't be the ones to shoulder all that on our own. We're not supposed to, right? So to hold this space in this way is so empowering. It's like, oh,
Mm.
yeah, we're
Thank you so
supposed
much, Linda, for this. There's so much in what you said that I connect with, and I really do believe in that. And I now can't wait to read this book that you just mentioned because it
to.
sounds really incredible. And yeah, and I hope that whoever is listening to this right now will maybe also feel this spark of inspiration to connect to the community of dreamers around or create a community of dreamers around and be able to, as you said, maybe share this burden, this responsibility, the sorrows, the happiness, everything, because through our dreams actually we share everything, not only the heavy stuff, also our joy and love and so on. So can you just say if someone would like to connect with you, your services you're offering, where can they find that information?
Absolutely. So I'm happy to connect through there's my therapy site,
Mhm.
which is Lightning Tree Therapy. That came from a dream. That's all
Right.
sense. Uh-huh. Um, so there's Lightning Tree Therapy, and then there's, of course, the Institute for Dream Studies website. And there's ways to connect with me through those two places. So I'm happy to support. It's just neat. Some of the messages I get, some people just want to be heard. Some people just want
Yeah.
to be validated for their experiences. And others, and most of the time, they do want community. They do want to find other people who are having these experiences too. So it's a lovely way to connect
Amazing.
others too. And it's just neat to see who shows up. So I welcome that for sure.
Thank you so much, Linda. It was very beautiful and deep conversation. And we didn't touch on the visitation dreams, but maybe we're just going to have another talk some other time because it's also a subject that really interests me, but I think it's a big subject in itself. So thank you again for your
I
time,
agree.
for
Mm.
your work, and may we all have beautiful and impactful dreams.
Thank you. This was lovely. Joanna, I would love to come back and talk to you about visitation. Yes, I agree. It's another deep dive.
We're
So
going to do that.
do that. Yes.
Thank you, Linda.